Hello, this is Mike Shaughnessy. I'm here to talk about the Hyatt Regency bridge collapse. Happened back in 1980, 40 years ago. It's been a topic widely discussed among engineering students ever since. I can't imagine I'm going to say anything that hasn't been touched on already or that you haven't already heard before. But here goes nothing. This video accompanies a PowerPoint, which I don't have because due to COVID, I don't have a projector, and I'm not going to be projecting this on my wall, and didn't feel the need to go out and get one. So just click along the slides that I've submitted in addition to this video. So slide one here, we're going to discuss who's at fault. We kind of came up with four people that could be at fault. Was it Gillum Colaco International? It's an engineering firm that was responsible for the job. Jack Gillum was the owner, and he pretty much passed off most of his responsibility to Dan Duncan. Dan Duncan is the guy who came up with the original design for the atrium bridges. So was it their fault or was it Haven Steel Company? They were the ones that manufactured the threaded steel rods that the bridges were hanging from. So was it their fault? The design change that they made was that the reason that the bridge failed, and were they to blame for it? Was it the building owner, the owner of Hyatt, which I believe was Hallmark was the name of the company, or um, owner's name? Not really too sure on that one. But anyways, did they fail because he had to have this bridge designed a certain way, and engineers told him that it wouldn't be safe, but he said, no, this is what I want, and do it anyways? Was that the case? Was it the contractor? Did they ignore the engineering drawings, and did they kind of just come up with their own thing? So what happened? So we'll go a little bit further into it and talk about some design obligations and who's responsible, leading up to who's responsible, and why that might be the case. So Gillen and Associates claim that a preliminary design was provided and that it's common in industry for metal fabricators to perform calculations. So I guess what he's saying here is that, hey, here's my little drawing. I didn't really do any numbers with it. That's kind of on you, but this should work. Um, but I haven't checked it. That's more or less what he's saying. Um, Video I watched said that the state law in Missouri, where this was, Missouri, Kansas, one of the two, Kansas, Missouri. I guess that once you put your stamp, your engineering seal of approval on there, you're taking responsibility for all aspects related to engineering. So according to the state, it's kind of at this point, it's looking like um, maybe it was Gillum and Company. Maybe they had something to do with it. But what are design obligations? I mean, if I'm an engineer, do I just get to say, hey, I drew this up on a napkin, um, kind of have a good intuition that it should work? I've seen stuff like in the past, it should be fine. And doesn't matter if it's just a small project as much as it does if it's a hotel atrium over there at the Hyatt. So what if I design a shower door and I'm like, I think this will work. Don't really have any dimensions here or anything, but yeah, it sounds good. And then somebody orders this shower door off of my dimensions and it doesn't work. Um, yeah, that would be my fault because I said it would work. So if I don't know it's gonna work, I should definitely make a note like that. So this slide here, can't see it from my house. Am I liable? That's addressing a situation where you're no longer working for a company and you think of something that comes up and you're like, should I tell that company? Is it my problem? And so what came to my mind when I thought about that question is I've worked with a lot of people in the past where you're like, hey, I noticed something and that doesn't look right, and they'll say something along the lines of, "Can't see it from my house." So basically, it's just meaning that they don't care. So which I don't believe is ethically correct. I think no matter if something you're building or designing is gonna affect the well-being of society as a whole, or even just a few individuals, then I believe it's your responsibility to inform them at any time if you were to become aware of a situation that would be unsafe for them. Design testing. So I'm pretty sure this design could be tested. I've seen a couple YouTube videos where they did it. In fact, that they didn't hook up force gauges or anything like that, but more or less they explained the difference of how the load was applied. So without any graphics here, I was going to draw something behind me, but I don't really feel like it. Essentially, they went from a single rod to a dual rod, and by doing this, they doubled the load that was applied to the nut and the fastener. So, and the nut and the fastener is not actually what failed. It was actually the steel girder itself, where the welds were, is what looks like it failed to me. So, really, I think the design maybe would have been okay if some other welds would have been put in place. I mean, that's of course not saying without knowing the shear stress of those rods and other engineering stuffs, because hey, I'm not a civil engineer, but clearly if I was going to design something and I was not able to represent it simply mathematically on a piece of paper, like has been done for this case, then I would just build something. They call that the dummy method in the tile layout world. So if you're laying out a wall and it's 12 feet tall and you got 12 tiles, you could probably calculate that's going to be, 12 whole pieces of tile. But if you got something off and you're not very good at math, you could just lay those tiles out on the floor, measure it, and then you know for sure. So if you're not that smart, just be a dummy about it. And I'd rather be right and a dummy than wrong and smart. So here's we're going to talk about the timeline now and the accident prevention. So they had a few different chances to correct this. In the original design, when they drew this up, they should have actually performed a calculation and realized they were only at 60% of what's required by the state. And then when the fabricator brought up his concern about a single threaded rod that length, they could have redone the calculations then. And then one more time during the construction process in October of 78, they had a collapse and they could have gone back through and addressed the design flaw at that time. But none of those things were done. So about 114 people died. Well, 114. That's what the news sources say. And more than 100 injured. I forget the exact number. So accident prevention is the next slide here. So accident prevention can be done through establishing checkpoints within the processes that follow every time a product is being created, which would help improving the overall quality of the product. You got checks and balances, so you're preventing human error. You're going over it more than once, so you're able to look for different areas where you can improve the efficiency, whether in the design process or the manufacturing process. So you could kind of implement these things by hiring a design control team or a quality control team responsible for that sort of thing. And you could either do that internally or through an independent third party. So some questions to ask about how to avoid, ethical dilemmas in the when you're being hired is how can we ensure that decision making is done on an ethical basis rather than financial? That's a good question. How can we improve the culture to make it harder for unethical decisions to pass? So definitely culture is huge in companies. If you have an unethical culture, then you're going to have more people agreeing to make these unethical decisions. Or if your culture promotes ethicity, then you're going to be in better shape. So lessons learned. Lesson one for me was to know the law. Definitely, Dan Duncan thought that his preliminary design didn't need to have the test done; that somebody else would do it. State of Missouri ultimately decided that no, he was at fault, and that when he put his seal on it, um, that's what his seal said. So lesson one: know the law, know constraints of what you're designing, whether it's patent laws, you know, building codes, whatever it may be. Lesson two for me is just take responsibility early on and do the job that you said you were going to do. You know, these guys said that they were going to design this. They more or less didn't take responsibility the whole way through. Kept on trying to pass blame off to the other person, and ultimately it's just negligence on their part. They're being lazy. Thought it didn't require their attention, and then turns out it did.